Hi everyone, it's Lisa. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have some fun and exciting cards to share with you, and these are Pink and Main products. So they consist of these gorgeous butterflies. I am so in love with this butterfly stamp set, and there's also some panel dies that you can use for your backgrounds, and there's also a plaid panel die that I'm going to show you all about. So if you want to see these products up close and how I made these cards, please stay tuned. So Michelle over at Pink and Main was so nice to send me these products to play with and to show all of you. So first we have this beautiful butterfly stamp set. And this stamp set is a large stamp set. The actual stamp set itself is 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. And it has this beautiful butterfly and these sentiments: "You are truly amazing. I am here for you always. You always know just what I need to hear. Dearest friend, and I love you." So the actual butterfly itself, that butterfly is so large, it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so it will fit the entire front of a A2 size card. I also received these panel dies, and these panel dies are so neat because they are layering dies. So you can just use your cardstock and die cut it in several different colors and use these dies to make a beautiful butterfly just out of cardstock. I also have these plaid cover dies, and there's two panels. There's an A and a B, and you can use these as standalone, or you can stack these and use them as layering dies. And I will have links to all of these products down in the description box below. So for my first card, I am inking up this large butterfly. I cut down a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and that is the same size as the front of an A2 size card. And I'm inking up this butterfly using my Versafine Onyx black ink, and I am using my Misti to stamp it out because you can see that I do have to stamp it a few different times, and using the Misti is key in getting the same stamped image in the same exact position several times. And since that ink stays wet a little bit longer, I am just using my heat tool to dry that really quick because I want to go ahead and start coloring with it. If you don't do this step, you'll end up smearing your ink unless you just let your panel sit out and dry just for a little bit before you start coloring. So I am using my Zig markers. They're the Zig Clean Color Rail Brush pens. I started out by laying down the cobalt blue color, and then I came in with purple, and then I'm going to come in with my pink Zig marker. And I'm just coloring all that up. Now, you can use these pens with water, so if you had a water brush and you wanted to give this more of a watercolor look, you can do that, but I didn't use water because I wanted to keep the vibrancy of those colors. So after I put the color down, I then took my blender pen and I just blended the two colors together a little bit better. So I'll blend the blue and the purple together, and then I'll blend the purple and the pink together. And then I'll come over to the other side and do the wing on the right side of that butterfly. Now, if you don't have these Zig markers, you can use any kind of markers to color this up. If you wanted to use your Copics or your Spectrum Noir markers, or if you wanted to use pencils, you can even use your Spectrum Noir glitter pens and color these up, and that would look really pretty too, because then it would add glitter to these butterfly wings. So here I'm just finishing the coloring and then using my blender pen just to blend those colors out a little bit better. And I also come in with my black Zig marker and just put a little bit of black over the center just to make that black a little bit more vibrant. So you can see that I actually stamped out and colored up a second butterfly, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with that one in just a minute. But in the meantime, I'm cutting them down to a 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 inch panel. So it's going to be slightly smaller than an A2 size card. That way when I put it on a card base, it will have some edge hanging over the side with the card base showing underneath. So I stamped out the "I love you" sentiment from the stamp set, and I'm putting this on an A2 size black card base. And then I'm taking the other butterfly. Notice that I'm just fussy cutting it out because I'm going to layer this one directly on top of the one that's on the actual card front so that it can look dimensional. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking some foam, some double-sided adhesive foam tape, cutting it down, just putting it in the center of that butterfly so that I can fold up the wings. And then I'm just going to add that down right to the center, and you can see all of that beautiful dimension that that gives. Now, you don't have to add that extra layer of the butterfly for the extra dimension. You can just leave it as a flat card without adding that extra layer. And to add some extra bling to this butterfly, I'm just adding some silver gems to the center. And then I'll add a few just right around the sentiment at the top, and these are going to be much smaller because the larger ones are in the center. So just add a few up there at the top and a few at the bottom. And then because this is a black A2 size card, you obviously can't write on the inside of that, so I'm just adding a layer of white cardstock on the inside. And that white cardstock was cut down to 4 by 5 1/4. So that completes my first card, and I love the dimension and the bright, bold colors of this butterfly. So moving on to card 2. I take a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock once again, and I'm going to stamp down my butterfly once again with the Versafine black ink. But this time I'm going to do some heat embossing, so I take my powder tool and rub that over top of the cardstock before I stamp this down. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp down the butterfly, and I'll give it a few impressions there, so just ink that up again and stamp that out just to make sure I get a nice black crisp image. And then I'm going to take some black embossing powder and sprinkle it over the entire top of that butterfly. And once that's completely covered, I will just shake off the rest of that embossing powder and then just wipe around where any embossing powder might have got stuck on that white cardstock. And then I'll use my heat tool to heat set that. And when you use the embossing powder, it will just give a nice, sparkly, crisp image. Now, you don't have to do this step when you're making this card. You can just stamp it down in black and color it up, but I like that nice kind of, it's almost like a glittery finish that that embossing powder gives. So again, for this butterfly, I'm using my Zig Clean Color Real Brush pens, and I use yellow as my lightest color in the center. And then I come in with the bright yellow, which is more of an orangey yellow color, and then I will finish off with the orange color. So I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of different color combinations that you can use when you're coloring up this butterfly. And if you're ever stuck, if you just go on Pinterest and you just search for butterfly images, a whole bunch of different color combinations will come up, and you can look at those colors on Pinterest and kind of get an idea for different colors for your butterfly. If you didn't want to use a 3-color combo, you can use a 2-color combo, or even just a 1-color would look beautiful as well. So just coloring this up and blending those colors together and using my blender pen in order to do that. I will be cutting this butterfly out of this panel, so I will end up fussy cutting it, but before I do that, I'm taking another piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm just taping this down with some of my mint tape from scrapbook.com. This tape will ensure that when I remove it, it does not tear the paper. So I'm going ahead and inking this up with some Distress Oxide inks, and I'm using Carved Pumpkin on the outside, which is my darkest orange, followed by Fossilized Amber, and then the middle will be Scattered Straw. And I'm just blending all of those colors together, and I just love the Distress Oxide inks because they blend so nicely on the Bristol Smooth cardstock. This panel I did cut down to 4 3/4 by 5 3/4. I made it slightly larger than A2 size so that I can eventually cut it down. I did spritz it with water, and I'm just using a paper towel to put over that cardstock to lift up the water from that cardstock. And then I will peel back the tape and you can see that beautiful ink blended background. So here I'm going to be using the plaid cover dies. These come in panel A and panel B. Now you can purchase these individually, or if you wanted to purchase them together, you can. They are separate purchases, so just keep that in mind. And the nice thing about purchasing both of them is that you can layer these panels. So this particular one is panel die B, and then this one is panel die A, so you can use them individually, or if you wanted to, you can layer these up. So you can see what they would look like if you layered up, and you would just have more lines. And I love the look of that layered look. It's just so nice. You can also use these with different color cardstock. So here is just some different color cardstock. You can kind of get an idea of what they would look like individually versus layered. And when you use two different color cardstocks, you can see that beautiful plaid look that you get with the two color combination. So I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on the back of this particular die cut piece. This was panel die A, and I'm just going to pop it on top of my ink blended background. These dies do cut out A2 in size, so they're already cut for an A2 size card base. So I'm just layering these onto my ink blended background, and I'll eventually be able then to trim that down so that it does measure A2 in size. A2 in size is 4¼ by 5½. So you can see just layering those two panels onto each other, and then here is where I'm just taking out my paper trimmer and just trimming off the excess, because remember that I did have a little bit of a larger panel when I did the ink blending, so I had some excess cardstock there. And now I'm going to take this beautiful butterfly, and I am going to fussy cut that out, and I am also going to stamp out the sentiment. Just stamping out this sentiment here on some white cardstock, and then I will add my butterfly to that panel, and I love the way this looks. So gorgeous. And then I will add my sentiment to the card layer. So the sentiment says, "I am here for you always." Just add it right there on the bottom. And then I will add that entire card layer to an A2 size card base. And it is a black card base, so you can see that I have a little bit of black peeking out of the edges. I did trim that panel down a little bit shorter than A2 in size so that I can have some of that black peeking out. And because it is a solid black on the inside, I just cut a piece of paper, white cardstock, 4 by 5¼ to put on the inside. And that completes card 2. So moving on for card 3, I am going to be making a slimline card. I'm going to do a little bit of watercoloring here. So I'm taking some of my zig markers, and I have my orange zig marker. I just scribbled on a little bit of orange there on my mat, and then I'm going to put some pink down. These are all the same colors I've used in my previous card, and then I'm going to scribble down some of the yellow. And that slimline panel is a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock cut down to 8¼ by 3¼ and then I'm just using my spritzer and spritzing some water on those ink splots there on my mat, and then I just turn my paper over and then just pick up some of that ink. So I'm gonna just kind of create like an ink swooshing technique here, watercolored look on this Bristol smooth cardstock. I still have a lot of white space left on this cardstock panel, so I'm just adding more ink to my mat, spritzing it with water, and then picking it up again with the cardstock layer. And you can repeat that process as many times as you want until your cardstock layer looks the way that you want it to look. And then just make sure that you use a heat tool and dry that if you're going to use it immediately. So here I'm going to go ahead and use this large butterfly stamp, and I'm going to stamp it out onto this slimline panel. I do use my powder tool to put down on that panel because I am going to be using some embossing or doing some embossing with this. So I do stamp it up with my Versamark ink, which is what I use when I heat emboss. So I'm also going to put another stamped impression at the top of that panel. So again, I'm just kind of repositioning that to make sure that stamp doesn't go over top of that Misti, otherwise the door won't close on that Misti. So just inking it up with my Versamark, stamping it down, And then I'm going to use some white embossing powder, just sprinkle that all over the top. Do it on the bottom one as well as that top one there, and just shake off the excess. And then I will be able to use my heat tool, and I'll be able to then heat set that. And when you heat set it, you're just melting the embossing powder. Now you could also use this, if you don't have embossing powder, you can also just do some black images, and this is one way of using that stamp without having to actually color, because you're not coloring the actual stamp, you're just, coloring up the cardstock. If you want to just use a solid panel and then just ink that up with black, that would be pretty too. So you don't have to color this stamped image. So here I'm just doing some more embossing. I'm stamping out a sentiment on some black cardstock, putting some white embossing powder over the top of that and heat setting that. This sentiment says, "You are truly amazing." And then I just trim that down, and then I just glued that down to the center of that panel. And then I will add that to a black Slimline card base. And the Slimline card base, to get your Slimline card base, cut your cardstock to 8.5 by 7 and score at 3.5 inches. And then I'm just adding some gems there just to add a little bit of bling, and I am just loving how this card turned out. I think that's so pretty with that watercolor look. So here's the completed card. I love those colors, they're so beautiful. And then moving on to my last card, I'm using the Bold Butterfly Cover Die Panels A, B, and C. And I did put the actual letters of those panel dies on the back just so that I knew which ones they were. So you can see that the panel die A, it actually will cut out the actual panel with the border all around, and then panels B and C cut some layering pieces. Now each one of these is a separate purchase, and if you wanted to do the layering, you would have to purchase B and C to do the layering and then layer those under A. Now if you wanted just to purchase panel die A and have just a one color butterfly, you can definitely do that. So here I did die cut some of those, at one of the panels out of some green glitter paper, and then the other one out of just some solid purple cardstock, and I'm just layering that up, and I love how that glitter is showing underneath that butterfly. I think it's so pretty. And then I am going to add some glue to the back of the black panel. Now, as I said, you can use this particular panel. This is panel A. You can use that by itself on a card if you wanted to. But if you wanted to do the layering, you'd have to pick up the other two dies as well. But you can see how that black, it just makes those colors pop. Isn't that gorgeous? And you can make this butterfly any color you want. So if you don't want to do coloring, you can just use your cardstock and grab these dies and make a beautiful butterfly out of just cardstock, just as I did here. So I'm going to put these on a piece of pattern paper. I was just going to put it on a white card base, and I said, nope, I think this needs something underneath it. So I have this piece of pattern paper here. It is cut down to A2 in size, 4¼ by 5½, and then I just add glue to the back of the butterfly and add it to the pattern paper. And I have a little piece of the pattern paper just extending beyond the right side of that panel. So I'm just using my scissors here just to trim that off. You can just get your scissors right underneath that panel die and be able to trim that off. So here I'm just stamping out using my Versamark ink. A sentiment says "I love you" on some black cardstock, and I did use some white embossing powder there. Just going to heat set this sentiment, and then just trimmed it out. I'm cutting a little fishtail banner there on the end of that, and then I'm going to adhere that to the top of this card layer, flush with the border of that panel die, and then just add a few epoxy dots. Actually, these are little green, very light green gems that I'm adding here, and they match the green in that glitter, which is really pretty. And then I'm just adding that to an A2 size white card base, and you can see how that panel die is the perfect size to fit over your A2 size card base. So I will have links to all of these products down in the description box. So if you're interested in purchasing any of these items, head down to the description box and you'll see the links there. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, and also leave me a comment and let me know which card was your favorite. I would love to hear your feedback on these cards. And don't forget to subscribe for more card making tutorials. Thanks for watching, and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.